Hello, my name is Cameron Sabat, and welcome to Cutting to the Case. Today we're joined by Congressman Jake Auchincloss. He's the United States Representative for Massachusetts' 4th Congressional District. A graduate of Harvard College and MIT Sloan, he served as a U.S. Marine Corps officer commanding infantry in Afghanistan and Special Operations Unit in Panama before entering business and local government. He was elected to Congress in 2020 after serving on the Newton City Council. In Congress, Auchincloss has worked across issues spanning healthcare and biomedical innovation, national security, technology, energy, and economic policy. His recent work has focused heavily on modernizing American clinical research, including a bipartisan effort to integrate clinical trials into routine healthcare and accelerate the development of new treatments. He's also advanced bipartisan legislation addressing Alzheimer's detection and reform of the 340B drug pricing program. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your service.
Cameron, nice to be with you.
Absolutely. So to dive right in about your background, first of all, you went from Harvard to the Marine Corps, then MIT, then the private sector, local government, and Congress. Looking back, which transition changed the way you think the most?
I haven't been asked a question that way. That's a nice way to frame it. I think I would say the largest air gap is between the military and politics. I left active duty and then worked on a political campaign, then ran for city council myself while going to school. And the reason that's the biggest gap is that the tolerance for bullshit is just so radically different in those two different fields. In the military, you're going on a 3-day patrol, you don't pack enough water, you're going thirsty. In politics, I mean, it's just all hand waving, right? And so that disjunction between the two fields is to me the biggest difference. And I'd say it's one thing I try to bring to politics is a tight feedback with reality is, obviously you've got to be able to communicate things in a way that has rhetorical pitch and that inspires people. You want to enlist people to a future vision that is the nature of politics, but it has to respond to the conditions and the realities around us, because otherwise you're really misleading people. And I think that's what reduces trust in governance.
Thank you very much. And about the, you know, uh, experience from the military, you commanded Marines in Afghanistan, later in special operations. What did military leadership teach you that Washington still struggles to understand specifically?
Uh, I think the aphorism that amateurs talk strategy and professionals study logistics, which again goes back to the core conviction that big ideas, lofty ideas are an important narrative mechanism, but they have to be executed against, or otherwise it's just a hallucination. And then the second big one is officers eat last. Marines are taught that when you're a second lieutenant, when you're a general, your enlisted Marines are cared for before you see to yourself. And we need political leaders to think the same way, that if voters are facing health premiums going up 10% per year like they are in Massachusetts, then you can't be patting your own nest as a politician. You've got to be addressing those drivers of inflation that are making life so hard for the middle class.
Yes, yes, really attack it head on, very direct. And in combat, decisions often have to be made with incomplete information. How's that changed the way you make decisions in Congress?
Yeah, I wouldn't tie a direct link to decision making in those two different fields. I think they're just so radically different. Like with, I'm sure most people, just as I get older, I develop more confidence in my own ability to recognize patterns and make judgments. You're always going to have incomplete information, but you can see what rhymes across different fields. Where I see the biggest gains is when I can take ideas from different fields and collide them together. That's the most fun I have. I actually read very little about politics. That may surprise people. I read enough to stay abreast with current events, and I read sort of the DC play-by-play stuff so that I know committee machinations, et cetera, to do my day job. But when I actually read for pleasure or read for expansion of my own knowledge, I read history, I read science. I just finished the book, The Proof in the Code, about lean and the adoption of AI and mathematics, for example, and seeing how other fields deal with uncertainty and how other fields deal with conflict resolution is always illuminating to me.
Yes, and that's incredible that you're a master of all trades here, and
Well,
I appreciate that. You grew up surrounded by medicine and biomedical research, and now healthcare has become a major part of your work in Congress. How did that information shape the issues you chose to pursue?
you're right that I grew up in a family of medical scientists, mom, dad, stepfather, aunts and uncles, and I represent a district of public health professionals, biotech entrepreneurs and investors, basic research scientists, physician scientists. People start new biotech ventures on the sidelines of soccer games in Brookline and Newton and Needham and the suburbs of Boston. And so I think they do want to see a strong champion for biomedical R&D in Washington. That's what I try to do. There are three fronts to me about how does the federal government be a strong partner for biomedical R&D broadly. Number one is the federal government needs to be an impact investor, invest in the kind of curiosity-driven, peer-reviewed basic research that the private sector will underfund systemically. We do that obviously through the National Institutes of Health and through the National Science Foundation. We got to expand that funding. We got to protect that funding from politicization, as this administration is trying to do. And we also have to be introspective and self-critical about how we can better fund unconventional and contrarian ideas, because that is where the best science ultimately comes from, is ideas against the grain. What were called suspicious novelties in Galileo's time. I love that phrase, suspicious novelties. We want more suspicious novelties in science. So we're an impact investor as a federal government. The other two things that the federal government has to do for biomedical R&D is be a smart regulator. That's Food and Drug Administration primarily. The last FDA commissioner, Marty McCary, was not a smart regulator, and I helped get him fired. We have to make sure that agency is a strong partner to investigators so that they have clear timelines and endpoints to innovate against. And then finally, the federal government has to be a value-based customer, right? Medicare, Medicaid, VA buys a lot of the products from biomedical R&D, pharmaceuticals and otherwise. And so paying for value is really important to create the market signal necessary for more R&D.
And when you think about R&D and the future of healthcare here, you recently introduced bipartisan legislation expanding access to blood-based biomarker testing for pre-symptomatic Alzheimer's disease. As our ability to predict disease improves, how should medicine handle the ethical problem of telling healthy people what may happen decades later?
Ultimately, I think that's going to be up to healthy people, potentially with genetic counselors, to make that decision in an informed way, right? What I think about in terms of addressing disease, though, is as we understand the etiology of Alzheimer's better and better, and we got a lot more work to do, I think it's increasingly clear that the way that we're going to cure Alzheimer's, the way that my kids can be the first generation to grow up without that moral and medical burden, is not that when they develop symptoms when they're 70, that somehow we're able to clear out enough amyloid plaque to make them cognitive or lucid again. It's that when they're 40 and biomarkers are picked up in their blood that indicate the beginnings of pre-symptomatic Alzheimer's, they're able to take a combination of therapeutics or prophylactics or whatever and prevent Alzheimer's in the first place. That's probably where the science is trending. And so pre-Medicare Alzheimer's coverage for the testing is trying to get policy aligned with where the science is going, similar to kidney dialysis, right? Medicare covers dialysis for people who are under 65 for kidney disease because it's actually a good investment for Medicare and it's the right thing to do for people who otherwise would be suffering.
Yes, and it is the right thing to do. And if you could maybe change one FDA or clinical research rule tomorrow to accelerate cures without compromising patient safety, what would it be?
Higher success rate in phase 2. There was a great paper that just came out in Nature that looked at, of all the different phases in drug development, where would an improvement along the dimensions of quality or cost have the greatest impact on the total amortized cost of drug development. And what's very clear is phase 2 increased success rate at phase 2, not even faster phase 2 trials, not even cheaper phase 2 trials, but increased success rate in phase 2 would have the biggest bang for the buck. And so I view it as every question that we ask about clinical trials modernization, questions about AI's use in drug discovery, the pivot point on those questions should be, what is the outcome on success rates in phase 2? Because if it goes up, that you're getting literally probably twice as many shots on goal for the same dollar spent.
And I'd also like to transition as well to pharmaceutical benefit managers, pharmacy benefit managers. As you know, we had Mark Cuban on recently. He spoke a lot about PBMs, and you focused a lot on PBMs. What do you think is fundamentally broken about the way they operate today, and what would meaningful reform look like?
Rebates, fundamentally.
Hmm.
Everyone in America complains about high list prices for prescription drugs, and almost every stakeholder in the healthcare system gets paid more the higher list prices go. So, don't follow the words, follow the money, right? And the original sin of our drug pricing supply chain is this use of rebates. One, rebates to create anti-competitive transactions between PBMs and pharma and between PBMs themselves, to put sick people on the hook to pay more rather than to get their bills covered when they get sick. Basically, rebates have driven a reverse insurance scheme where sick people help cover and defray expenses on premiums for healthy people. And then rebates also have basically created the gap between gross and net. That bubble is created a huge amount of oxygen. All the oxygen inside that bubble between gross and net fuels a bunch of schemes and scams that ultimately don't benefit the patient and don't drive more innovation. So if I had to, wave my magic wand and fix one thing, it would be just the use of rebates as a tool, as a business tool in the drug pricing supply chain.
And the 340B program was originally designed to help safety net providers serve vulnerable patients. What does the program get right, and where do you think it needs reform?
So 340B, what is it? 340B is a program designed in 1992 to benefit, at that time, about 32 hospitals that serve low-income populations, and it gave them discounted drugs. And sometimes it's conveyed that they were supposed to use those discounted drugs to then hand off discounted prices to those patients. That's actually not totally true in the original statute. The idea was they were going to use the delta between what they paid for the drug and what they charged for the drug to help fund their operating expenses overall. Basically, it was a subsidy from pharmaceuticals to a group of 32 hospitals and also to some community health centers. And what ended up happening in the last decade is that this program, which started small, has since ballooned into about a $100 billion rebate pool and now covers something like 40,000 providers. And so if everyone can picture, like in your basement, right, you got this like electrical box, and picture like a really, really old electrical box where you have all of these wires plugged into different sockets, and it's like a complete mess, and you're worried, like you sit there and you're like sweating because if you unplug one thing, for all you know, your toaster is going to light on fire. That's the US healthcare system. There's just this mess of cross subsidies. And 340B is in some ways one of the oldest wires with the most different plugs in all the different outlets in that old electrical box, where it's like you pull one thing out and like all of a sudden, some FQHC in Arkansas is freaking, like it's a crazy system. And my view is cross subsidy and complication in healthcare tends to be an invitation for bad actors and for non-patient centric care. So what we try to do with 340B is to simplify the program, to put guardrails on the program, and to restore the program back to its original intent, which was a relatively straightforward subsidy from pharma to safety net healthcare providers.
Yes, and thank you for that description for the audience as well. What do you think people in business and medicine most misunderstand about how policymaking actually works in Washington?
Healthcare is a $5 trillion industry. The single biggest thing that we misunderstand, I would say that the misconception that most frustrates me in healthcare is that everyone wants healthcare premiums to go down. right? Hard to find a more popular political conception than we want healthcare premiums to go down. Healthcare premiums are one family's expense and another family's wages. Basically, the story of the US economy since the pandemic is on net zero job growth in every single sector except for healthcare and social assistance, which has seen a ballooning job growth. So when we talk about healthcare premiums going up, the other side of that equation is more healthcare jobs. And that's a trade-off. Politicians need to address that trade-off, and we need to be honest about it. If we want healthcare premiums to go down, that is going to mean that we have to do things that will require hospitals to tighten their belts. Why hospitals? Hospitals are about 30% of all healthcare spending, and they're the fastest inflating sector of the healthcare economy. Hospitals employ a lot of people. That is just a fundamental political arithmetic. And I am frustrated sometimes when policymakers refuse to acknowledge those trade-offs because I don't think they're being candid with their constituents. Hey, we're going to lower healthcare premiums. In order to do that, we also have to require providers, pharma, insurance companies to belt tighten, which is going to have an impact on the ability for healthcare and social assistance to continue to be the fastest growing job sector in the US economy.
And that kind of also speaks to the tension, now that we're talking about tensions, between making medicines more affordable today and preserving the incentives to develop new medicines tomorrow. How do you think Congress should strike that balance?
I don't agree there's a tension, actually. I disagree with that framing. I think that's a framing that is very convenient for people. But if you actually dig into the numbers, it's not an accurate one. So to start with, who controls what you pay? When you go to the pharmacy counter, doctor says, hey, you need to take some statins, or doctor says they have a new therapy for your type of cancer. Fundamentally, as a patient, who controls what you pay at the pharmacy counter for that drug?
Well, the pharmacy can determine.
No,
as well
pharmacy
as.
does not determine it. Your insurance company determines it.
Oh, yes.
Your insurance company, right? You pay premiums to your insurance company. Your insurance company negotiates with pharma to put their drug on their formulary through their PBM. And then they assign you a deductible and an out-of-pocket cost. That out-of-pocket cost is what you are paying out of your pocket, okay? Here's my question to you, Cameron. Why is there an out-of-pocket cost for that drug?
To reduce misuse and overuse.
Yeah. How many people do you know who are faking asthma to get access to inhalers?
No one.
What about people faking HIV to get access to HIV drugs?
No.
Or prostate cancer to get that good old chemotherapy people seem to love so much? Yeah. No. So that the concept you're describing is called moral hazard, right? I worked in Liberty Mutual. I'm very familiar with insurance theories. It's called moral hazard. The idea is, hey, if you have out-of-pocket cost, if you have some skin in the game, you're going to behave differently. And you know what? For automobile insurance, that's actually true. You're going to probably be a little bit more careful on those fender benders, maybe. Or if you get a little nick on your windshield, maybe you won't take it to a mechanic. Maybe you'll just kind of deal with it yourself. Fine. A little bit of moral hazard, a little bit of skin in the game makes some sense to induce better behavior. With some vanishingly rare exceptions in the biomedical field, there is no moral hazard. Right? If you have cystic fibrosis, you have cystic fibrosis and you need a drug for it. No moral hazard. There's nothing free in this world. I reject politicians who promise free things to people. You have to pay health insurance premiums. We all do. We pay them when we're healthy, just the same way that you pay local taxes. And then if your house starts burning down, the fire department comes. You pay your health insurance premiums, and if the house starts burning down because your kid gets a diagnosis for a genetic disorder, your fucking insurance company needs to come in and pay their goddamn bills. That's their responsibility. That's what you gave them premiums for. And these out-of-pocket costs and deductibles are unconscionable. If the insurance companies want to turn around and say to pharma, hey, we don't think your drug works, we think your drug is bullshit, fine. They're allowed to say that. They should negotiate with pharma. They absolutely should hold pharma's feet to the fire. But don't turn around, tell patients that you cover something, and then when that patient actually needs it, say, oh, but by the way, there's a coinsurance of 20%, so the list price was $7,000, so now you're paying, $1,400 every month. But that's not insurance. That's a shakedown.
And that's incredibly unfair to people who can't afford it. I mean, this is just, yes. And so, um, do you think that there are models of care overseas? We recently had the former chief medical officer of the UN who was leading Singapore's healthcare research, and he said, Singapore has, I believe, a small fee for healthcare. And I'm curious if there are any models that you might want to blueprint for effective United States healthcare overseas.
Yeah, I think we need to both be curious and cautious about that because the United States is distinct in its population demographics and our social determinants of sickness that I think can lead to wrong diagnoses if we're not careful. You look at Portugal and they've got a great community health backbone. You look at Singapore, as you said, their access scheme is generous, but also cost contained. You look at Taiwan; they do great data sharing, for example. You look at Switzerland with their insurance. Yeah, there's stuff to learn from all of that stuff. I think we have to be very clear-eyed, though, about the distinctions here in the United States demographically, which is we have a sicker population for an OECD country. We have a sicker population in terms of obesity, in terms of predilection to diabetes and to other chronic conditions. We have, I would say, less integrated ways of providing housing and addiction services. And all these things are upstream of the delivery of clinical care. And if we don't think about the upstream factors, I think we can lead to some wrong conclusions about the right way to do delivery of care. This is particularly poignant for me here in Massachusetts. There is no place in the world I would rather be if my kids got sick than Boston, Massachusetts. Best care in the entire world, right? And so I get a little defensive when people are like, oh, American healthcare, it's so terrible. Like, whoa, hold on. Like, best doctors, best scientists in the world are right here in Massachusetts. I will defend them all day long. That does not mean, though, that across all ways that we care for our population in America that we're doing it great. But we do have tremendously good providers of care in many places in the United States.
Yes, thank you so much. And do you have any final words of advice as well for our audience of students and early career researchers?
People talk a lot about the AI era, and I work with these tech evangelists. They come across my transom in DC a lot. I would just say, as much as this is an age of AI, this is also going to be the era of biology, though. Biology is, I think, going to be a frontier of astounding innovation, and I would just really encourage people to go into basic biomedical research.
Yes, and that's incredibly important and typically overlooked also by the general public because they're thinking, why study Drosophila, for instance, or some biochemical mechanism, but then eventually it becomes, the basis of some mRNA vaccine, or we've developed the scientific foundations for something much greater. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Cameron.
Yes. And this is Cameron Savitt from Cutting to the Case, signing off.